tapped.
Yeah, if this was the same list and he was playing with the Green Splash and had moved around some removal spells for Abrupt Decay, I would call the matchup a landslide. As it stands, it's simply just kind of bad for David.
And of course, our other matchup we will likely have time to watch unless something strange happens. You've got Junk mid-range against Blue-White Control. So buckle up for what will probably be a rather quick affair here, and then we will actually see Junk mid-range. I know a deck that is very popular at home, and a lot of people happy to see it make top 8 again.
Though, this matchup does have a way of dragging out in certain games. If the red aggro draw is kind of creature heavy and the mono black devotion draw involves Desecration Demon, the game can go on for a long time. But it also can be very quick as well.
Yesterday, a fun day of action. We saw Joe Lissette make it to the quarterfinals before being dispatched by David Daniel, and what was really a fun match to watch between the two of them.
Yeah, Joe won a pretty straightforward, easy game one, as Blue-White Control generally does against Mono Black Devotion. And then post-board, it was an interesting jockeying over, does Joe bring in his creatures? How much removal does David leave in? David left in a lot of removal. Joe left in his creatures, and that was a big tipping point for the matchup. That, and David took some aggressive lines I had never really seen before out of a Mono Black Devotion player. And David won a very impressive set of post-board games.
Some very aggressive use of Pack Rat in the matchup against Lissette. And it was able to work out for him. Thought he would take advantage of his card drawing engines, Erebos and Underworld Connections, but he had a different plan, and it certainly worked. Able to defeat Lissette and move on to this morning to play against Mono Red. Looks like Daniel's going to keep his hand. Rand is taking a look. You said Rand's deck list is kind of splitting the difference here between a normal Mono Red deck and Boss Sly.
Yeah, he is 19 lands, no Mutavaults, so that's a pretty aggressive construction. But he is playing Burning Tree Emissary and Firefist Striker, so he's looking to go a little bit longer than Tom was in Columbus last weekend.
Thoughtseize is where we're going to start here this morning. You're going to see a hand here of 2 mountains, a Searing Blood, a Titan Strength, 2 copies of Ash Zealot, and a Burning Tree Emissary. Daniel will get to select one of those. I think it'd be pretty telling if he takes Searing Blood. It means he probably has some sort of Pack Rat draw.
Yeah, and this is the type of draw, Pack Rat's often too slow against Mono Red aggro, and against Tom's list especially, it's not even part of the game. Against a deck like Kevin's, on the play, it can be pretty powerful. Especially against a hand with no 1-drop.
Yeah, Rand looking to draw 1-drop. I'm not sure how many he has in his deck list. You have to imagine it's between 10 and 12. We know he has Legion Loyalists hanging out in there.
He has 16.
That's way more than I thought.
16. The 12 that I like, the 8 good ones, Foundation Denizen, and then Legion Loyalists as well.
Well, there's a 1.
And it seems silly, but this is really important. Just to outpace Daniel's removal, this is also a deck that plays 4 copies of Devour Flesh, so this gives some protection for the Ash Zealots that Kevin has in his hand as well.
And Daniel has one of those Devour Fleshes in his hand. He's going to fire off another copy of Thoughtseize, and I think he has a 3rd copy in his hand as well, so I imagine that he's not too thrilled about this, but he's going to go down 2, 4, 6, 7. He's going to go down to 13, take both of the Ash Zealots, and kind of hope for the best here. We might see an upkeep Titan Strength.
Well, I do think that Thoughtseize is underrated in the matchup. Of course, these kind of draws look a little sketchy, but if this paves the way for Desecration Demon, Thoughtseize is a great way to set it up.
There is your upkeep Titan Strength, so this will be an attack for 4 at the very least, and Rand is going to try to set up his draw. Again, right now, Kevin is left with just a Mountain and a Searing Blood, so Thoughtseize has picked him apart, and we know that Daniel does have a copy of Titan Strength in his hand. Or excuse me, a copy of Devour Flesh. This is another Titan Strength, so this is going to be 3, 6, 7. Top card's going to go to the bottom. Daniel's going to go down to 6. So Daniel will take a draw here. There's a Mutavault hanging out. And he actually has the 4th Thoughtseize in his hand.
Now, because he knows about the card Searing Blood, he can't. If he's willing to Thoughtseize here, then Mutavault becomes a blocker. Otherwise, he would have to wait until he found something like Desecration Demon or Grey Merchant.
So it's turn 3, and David Daniels at 4.
A lot of that is his own doing, though.
This is true.
4 Thoughtseizes in the graveyard.
Will he attack?
Well, David absolutely, positively has to block, so it can't be a bluff.
Yeah.
His attacking is because he drew something of note.
Rand is certainly thinking about it. And here he comes. There's Mutavault. That's a Robolt Maka. You have to like that exchange, I think.
Yeah, both players have to do this.
Yeah.
So the Legion Loyalist is KO'd by the Mutavault as long as it's in play, so.
Ooh, a Pack Rat is the draw now for Daniel. It's a pretty good draw.
It's not bad. It is a little risky to deploy this turn.
May have some interesting Just Cast and Devour Flesh.
Yeah, possibly. Because he doesn't want to block with the Pack Rat this turn, one assumes. And then Searing Blood, Titan Strength, Robolt Maka, they're all lethal.
Yep.
And even if Kevin draws a creature, next turn's potentially pretty annoying.
And the text on Legion Loyalist will actually matter here, as those are creature tokens.
Yes.
If it gets to that point.
Well, Kevin would have to draw running creatures and then need some help because of the Devour Flesh, but that is another angle to consider.
Looks like we're deploying the Rat. Rand is going to take a draw here. Looked like it may have been a spell, but I think you're attacking here with Legion Loyalist no matter what.
Does not matter what he drew. Unless it's Searing Blood, and then you should just kill David.
Yes. That's a Maka, and that is going to do it. So some timely top decks there from Kevin Rand after having his hand shredded apart, and you can see all David Daniel can do is shake it head. 4 Thoughtseizes in game number 1. Probably not ideal, but that's kind of the way things broke here. And Kevin Rand with mono red up a game.
Yeah, and quick one there. I think Thoughtseize is actually fine in the matchup.
As do I.
It needs to be supplemented by Desecration Demon.
Yep.
If you don't get to that point, then the damage from Thoughtseize is a real liability. But if it does allow you to get to Desecration Demon on a stable board, Thoughtseize is just fine.
Well, we didn't see that happen. Kevin Rand, however, going to be up a game with mono red. He's going to go to the sideboards. We're going to do the same in just a moment, but it is trivia time. So Patrick will have a question for you guys in just a moment. The rules are pretty simple. Get your Twitters open. Hashtag SCG Premium. Make sure you're following at SCG Live. The winner of this trivia will be given 6 months of Star City Games Premium, and we will announce the winner at the conclusion of our semifinal round. And of course, as always, all giveaways here are at the sole discretion of StarCityGames.com. No affiliation with Twitch in these premium giveaways.
So these Mono Black Devotion lists pretty set in stone. 26 lands, a lot of 4-ofs, and then usually 2-of to round it out. David is playing 2 different 1-of removal spells in his main deck. Name both of those removal spells.
And if you can, hashtag the answer, SCG Premium. Make sure you're following at SCG Live. And again, we will announce the winner at the conclusion of our semifinal round, which is certainly underway right now. As we're going to head back to the match, take a look at some sideboards here. David Daniel, as we mentioned right at the top, no Farika's Cures, no Drowning Sorrows. You see the sideboard there. What do you like?
4 copies of Doomblade and the Bioblight. The end.
Just more removal.
Yeah. If he suspects that Kevin is bringing in the 3rd and 4th Searing Bloods, which I would do in Kevin's seat, then Duress starts becoming in play. Not the full 4, but a few of them. The bigger question to me is, what does David want to take out? In my experience, the worst cards in his deck are, in order, Underworld Connections. That's the worst one by far in this matchup. The next worst card is Lifebane Zombie. The next worst card after that is probably Thoughtseize, possibly Pack Rat. Those are the worst cards in the deck. So depending on how much of that kind of action he wants to get out, that'll dictate whether or not he wants to bring in the Duresses. But I think you're going to see the 4 copies of Doomblade and the Bioblight come in for sure.
On the other side, you see Kevin Rand. He's already got some Searing Bloods in his main deck. You have to imagine those other 2 are going to join us.
Yeah. For me, the tipping point is, do they play Lifebane Zombie or Night Veil Spectre? When they have Night Veil Spectre, I like keeping in 2, not bringing in the 3rd and the 4th. When they have Lifebane Zombie, I like bringing in all 4 because it's just too hard for them to cut Lifebane Zombie, Pack Rat, and never animate a Mutavault. So they're going to be high upside cards throughout the entire game. The way that David's deck is set up, I would also bring in the Eidolon here. He's got a lot of 1 and 2 mana spells, obviously his removal spells, so it's an upgrade over certain cards in the deck. I am not a fan of Skullcrack in this matchup. I know a lot of people are, so it wouldn't surprise me if Kevin brought it in, but it is, again, not a card I'm a fan of in the matchup. To me, the fight is about Desecration Demon, not Grey Merchant. You need to beat them, before they build up if they go removal spell into Desecration Demon, Skullcrack does nothing in those games. Those are the hardest games to win, and so I'd rather just have more creatures in the deck as a rule.
Yeah, I have seen a lot of players board in Skullcrack in these type of matchups, and it can be okay in some situations, but those situations where it's good kind of jump to the front of your mind is, man, I blew out that Grey Merchant, and then I was able to win the game because of that. But that's not really how it happens a lot of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Harness by Force is another card that I don't like, but I know other people bring in. I think that there's too often against Desecration Demon where they have a Mutavault left over that, you end up just killing a Mutavault with a active treason effect. You don't actually end up taking the Desecration Demon and killing them. It's also, again, bad in the games where they're just going removal spell into removal spell into removal spell. Those are the tougher games to win. And so I try to sideboard with that in mind, trying to beat the best draws, not trying to beat the mediocre draws.
I especially do not like Harness of Force when you're on the draw.
Yes.
On the play, I think an argument can be made, but on the draw here, where you're going to be probably playing catch up a little bit, and it's going to be tougher to get out in front. No, thank you with Harness by Force.
The problem here is that Kevin really has no bad cards in the matchup. The only card in his deck that I don't like is Titan Strength for this matchup. Everything else is fine. Even Maka's fine. So he doesn't have a lot of room to be sideboarding here.
Looks like Rand has a few lands in his, no lands in his hand, I believe. Maybe just one. You see a shock that he's looking at, and he is going to keep, so we're going to be underway. There's a Thoughtseize, and he sets his hand down immediately, so we're going to see that shock that's right on top. And David Daniel is going to show a Firefish Striker, another shock. Couple of lands there, so 2 mountains. Looks like maybe a Legion Loyalist and a Burning Tree Emissary. So not a bad hand, but we will see what thoughts he decides to take.
It's a solid hand here. He has protection against Pack Rat because he has 2 copies of Shock. He's got a good curve. This is a good hand. This would be one of those times where you would be really sweating if you're in Kevin's seat if you knew your opponent had Drowning Star or even Farika's Cure. But Kevin knows that David has no such tools.
The crazy thing is that it only takes one of those in this situation to get the job done. If there was one Farika's Cure, I don't want to pronounce the game over, but it would be so difficult for Rand to win.
Yeah, if David found a Desecration Demon on time and had a Freakish Cure, it's really hard for Kevin to win. But David has allocated his sideboard slots differently. And in fairness, he needed all of those to beat Lisette in the quarters.
This is certainly true. Well, it's decision time for David Daniel. He's at 18. He's got to decide exactly what card to take. He can take a 1-drop. I can't imagine he'd take a shock here, as there is a redundant copy. And Burning Tree Emissary is a card that may be worth taking, arguably the most powerful card in these red decks. And it looks like that's what we're going to go with. Don't want to let your opponent play multiple spells in one turn, especially when you don't have a way to stop them.
Yeah, you have no sweepers, and Devour Flush is in your deck. It's definitely one of the more dangerous cards that Kevin has access to.
This is a Legion Loyalist in for 1. Daniel's going to go down to 17. Daniel will take a draw here. It's a copy of Pack Rat. It looks like it's the second copy of Pack Rat, so I imagine he's probably going to consider deploying one of them here. And there one is. So now we're going to head back to Kevin Rand. Take a draw here. We know he has 2 copies of Shock in his hand. Let's make it a 3rd.
And if I'm Kevin, I'm not shocking this thing. He has a Firefist Striker and an Ash Zealot, so if he wants to play the game, he can really punish David for trying to make this Pack Rat happen.
It's an attack here for 1. I can see where you're coming from in that situation, simply because, he's not really doing a nice job of curving out now. He's kind of staggered on his mana.
Yeah, if Kevin draws a land the next turn, then what ends up happening is he gets to play Ash Zealot after the Firefist Striker, shock the initial Pack Rat. The token can't block. And how's he supposed to make rats for the rest of the game?
Yeah. There's a Lifebane Zombie, going to be double shock and Ash Zealot, and that Firefish Striker. So of course, Lifebane Zombie's not going to get anything. It's not going to get anything, excuse me, and it's certainly going to. I think it's going to die here in just a moment. I'm a little surprised not to see a shock get fired off on the end of turn there.
Yeah, that's a spot. I mean, I would never want, against a deck with Devour Flash, even though Legion Loyalist isn't very powerful, I would still not want to trade it creature to creature.
Yeah.
And Kevin's mana is at a premium too. I mean, he has 2 lands here, a lot of things to do, so I would never want to waste mana.
Looks like he's willing to trade. I feel undervaluing Legion Loyalist a little bit here. Maybe overvaluing Shock. I want to keep the pressure on and keep the board clear.
Yeah. And you have insurance against a follow-up Pack Rat even.
There's a Bile Blight off the top there for Daniel. Going to play a Temple. Top card's going to stay on top. Rand is going to draw a card here. It's a copy of Legion Loyalist. There's Ash Zealot. Don't know how long that's going to live. Looks like it may be time for a Bile Blight here. The question is, what does Daniel want to target? He's going to go with the Firefish Striker. Probably the better of the two.
Yeah, I understand. He knows there's another Ash Zealot, so he may want to leave it. There's the demon.
Yeah, I mean, he kept that on top very quickly. And it's not too much of a surprise to actually see that be the card that's coming into play right now.
Yeah.
Mountain the draw here for Rand.
And you can see this is why I dislike Skullcrack in the matchup. This is the game that's hard to win. What's happening here?
Thoughtseize you, removal spell. You know, Thoughtseize, Pack Rat, make you have an answer, removal spell, Desecration Demon.
Yeah. And this is also why the not shocking that Lifebane zombie is now such a disaster for Kevin, is every creature's at a premium because he has to sacrifice a creature every turn of this Desecration Demon. He's not killing it. It's in play. So, unless he brought in his mortars and compare it with a shock, that's the only way he's getting this thing off the table. So you can't afford to be trading your creatures like that because this is what the fight's about. This is the card.
And the big issue, too, is just now the thing is over the course of this game, he hasn't been too efficient with his mana. And it's so important against Mono Black that you be efficient with your mana because they're so efficient with theirs.
You see that shock was, it's 2 damage here, but how much point of damage would that Legion Loyalist be worth? It would have been 1 point of damage when it connected, and it would have been worth 5 points of damage this turn.
Now Legion Loyalist is going to bite the dust, going to come in for 4. So getting very, very aggressive here. Daniel's going to go down to 10. Looks like, I think that was another Desecration Demon, potentially.
It was a Pack Rat.
Was it another Pack Rat? Another Pack Rat's still not bad. No Mutavault among those lands, though, so if you're rooting for David Daniel, that's the only thing he's really missing right now. Trying to do a little math here for the Mono Black Devotion player. Maybe considering attacking here with Desecration Demon. We've seen him go into the tank before, and he certainly figured things out when he was playing against Joe Lissette. See if he can do it again here, down a game. Kind of put the Demon Trigger on the stack.
An attack is a little too aggressive this turn for my liking.
Don't think you need to make that move right now.
Yeah. It feels like it's incurring an unnecessary risk. And I think David's just drawn the same conclusion.
Pack Rat number 1. And in this matchup, it is better to actually have physical copies of Pack Rat instead of the tokens because of Legion Loyalist.
Yeah.
And I was a little afraid he may do this, which is play the land and then pass the turn back. As I said, I'd much rather have a copy of Pack Rat itself in play because of Loyalist text with Battalion.
Well, there is the upside of having the 5th land in play because Grey Merchant's such a valuable draw. But David didn't need to do that this turn. He could have just played 2 Pack Rats, left the land in his hand. If he draws Grey Merchant, he can cast it. If he draws other stuff, he can just discard that to the Pack Rat and keep the 5th land as insurance in case he draws Grey Merchant.
Yep. Here's a Burning Emissary. So the trigger will add some mana. This is a shock on a Pack Rat. And so now we're going to get an activation of Pack Rat, discarding a Pack Rat to make a Pack Rat.
Yeah, it's just all about if he wants to have access to all of his mana next turn, which I suspect he does.
And so there is a Pack Rat. That'll come in. Pack Rat will die. Shock gets the job done. Green mana floating right now from Burning Emissary. I don't think Rand is going to get much use out of that.
I think he's got to finish this off here, this Pack Rat. I guess he can hope that there's a chump block this turn.
Danny going to go down to 6. Last card is a shock.
I mean, if you shock the Pack Rat, you can hope that David draws just lands for a couple turns here. If you draw really any creatures at all, you may be able to finish off finish the job here.
Not quite sure what Daniel drew this turn.
There's a lot of draws that David has. Every removal spell, especially Bioblight, is a disaster for Kevin here. Grey Merchant, another Desecration Demon, but he does have a lot of draws that aren't very good in this spot.
And I think Kevin Rand's job is just to shorten this game.
Yeah.
The longer we go, the worse it is for him.
Absolutely.
Demon Trigger's going to go on, no sacrifice. Pass the turn back over to Rand. It's pretty important, too, for Rand not to draw lands in this situation. The more creatures, the better.
Keep in mind, Rand's build no Mutavaults.
I'm not quite sure what the card is that Kevin drew this turn. Drew it immediately face down. I think that was maybe just a passing of the turn, so we're in a bit of a holding pattern here as David Daniel drew a copy of Hero's Downfall. I think it's safe to fire that off.
Yeah, what David wants to do right now is try to trap Kevin into sacrificing a creature to tap the demon and then using his removal spells in combat to blunt the whole offensive.
Yep.
But his mana is also potentially tied up. He doesn't want to draw something like Desecration Demon or Grey Merchant next turn and not be able to cast it.
This is a telling attack. Means there was a follow-up, and it's a really good one. Grey Merchant of Asphodel. Gonna drain Rand for 4, but much more importantly, it is going to gain Daniel 10. That 2/4 is also in the way, and that's pretty much all it took to catch back up.
This is another reason that I don't like Skullcrack in the matchup is a 2/4 for 5 is not bad against you.
Yeah.
So it's not like you beat the Grey Merchant by having a Skullcrack.
Oh, in comes Ash Zealot. This is probably gonna be a Searing Blood, and it will. So with first strike damage on, Daniel's gonna go back down to 7. However, he's in the Abyss Lock.
Yeah, it is lethal now.
Desecration Demon's going to require you to pay the price every single turn or you lose the game. So Ash Zealot, Bite the Dust, Grey Merchant. We're going to add to a third one in just a minute. It was a good 3 cards there for David Daniel. He could have drawn very poorly, Thoughtseize, lands, maybe the wrong configuration of removal spells, but it was Downfall, Grey Merchant, Grey Merchant. That just shows the power of Mono Black Devotion.
Well, those were the best draws, but I think even just Doom Blades and Devour Flushes would have been difficult to beat in that spot. And that's just, that just tells you, again, the most important card in this matchup for David is Desecration Demon. That's his best weapon, supplemented by removal spells.
Game 3 is where we're headed in just a bit here. You see the sideboards on the screen. Now, ask you this, do you like Eidolon the Great Revel on the play?
I think it should have been in his deck on the draw.
Okay.
I mean, I think David has more than enough 2 and 3 mana spells that Eidolon's going to be probably an extra 2 or 4 points of damage. And that's really valuable because often in the contested games, Mono Red's winning very closely, barely getting across 0. And if you go back to that second game there, I think failing to shock the Lifebane Zombie might have been the whole thing. I mean, that might have been the whole game. He lost so many points of damage. The 1 point of damage that turn, and the way the game played out, probably another 5 points of damage to the turn that Desecration Demon got played. And Kevin was not that far off of winning that game at certain points. So 6 points of damage probably makes a big swing in the way that game plays out.
Typically it does when you're playing a mono red aggro deck. It's so important to be efficient with your mana and being efficient at taking down their life total. You can't really afford to miss, especially when this particular mono red deck, the power level of it isn't the highest.
No Fnatic and Mogus, nothing to draw you back into games.
Yeah, and even, past mono red decks over the course of Magic's history, if they've had steady sources of damage like Grim Lavamancer or Curse Scroll, this deck isn't that. You have to eke out every point of damage. It feels like when you win, a lot of the time you barely win, but you get the job done.
And no Mutavaults. I mean, there's not really any staying power in this list. It is just a pure beatdown deck.
So there's the potential that Kevin Durant may have let that one get away, and he may realize it, but he's got one more game to play, and thankfully for him, he's on the play.
Yeah. What I like about, you can see Kevin's really thinking about how he's sideboarding here. All 15 of his cards could be rationalized to bring in here. None of these cards are purely dead.
Yeah.
It's a tough sideboard. I would only bring in the top 6 cards you see there, the Eidolons and the 2 Searing Bloods.
Yeah, the other cards feel like they could be a bit of a trap, could get him in some trouble. I could certainly see bringing in Harness by Force here because he's on the play, but I wouldn't want a lot of copies of it. I would maybe want one to draw to.
Yeah, maybe one is correct, but even still. Depends what he wants to cut. Personally, in these kind of matchups where all your creatures are pretty much interchangeable, which they are in this matchup, I tend to cut one of a lot of stuff because of BioBlight in the opposing deck. You just don't want to draw 2s as much as you can, 2 copies of things, as much as you can avoid it. I think Titan Strength is bad enough in this matchup where those 4 can go pretty safely. And then after that, I would probably cut, 1 Foundry Tree Denizen, 1 Legion Loyalist, something like that.
Well, both players will be underway here shortly. Our other match between Josh Granado and Keith Selden, they're still in game number 1. And I have to imagine if that's the case, things are probably looking good for Blue Eye Control, but Junk can play a longer game.
It can go toe-to-toe for a long time, but I would be surprised, especially against a build with an Elixir. I mean, it's possible, in the builds that don't have Elixir, that you can play a Johnny, gain 100, and play defense long enough to deck them. That's not unreasonable. In the builds that do have Elixir, you need to win the game somehow.
Yeah.
And sometimes Junk can't do that, especially in the game 1 sets where there's just too many, Devour Flesh type cards floating around in your deck.
The old gain 100 with a Johnny could be something we see.
We have seen it.
I know Jeff
Hugel,
forced it.
He broke the monitor.
Yeah.
It only went up to 99 apparently.
Game 3 between Mono Black Devotion and Mono Red Aggro. This could be a three-peat here for Mono Red. We saw Tom the Boss Ross win the Season 2 Invitational with his Boss Sly deck. And then we saw Festus Resendez take down the Standard Open in very impressive fashion, beating David Bauer in the quarterfinals, Owen Turtenwald in the semis, and Joshua Ravitz in the finals. You want to talk about a murderer's row?
Yeah, it's a tough elimination rounds to get through for sure. Another lesson to take away from these games is that Thoughtseize is fine against Mono Red Aggro. It's probably not fine against Tom's build because it's too aggressive. But against decks like this, game 1, you probably don't want to draw 4. 4 is probably too many of them. But 1 or 2,
Perhaps.
1 or 2 is not bad. It is not bad. Again, I feel that Underworld Connections and Lifebane Zombie are borderline uncastable, and Thoughtseize is not that.
Yeah, Lifebane Zombie is a real stinker.
It is so bad.
Yeah, it is a real stinker. It actually gives me great joy when Lifebane Zombie's really bad in a matchup because of how good it is in the matchups where it's good.
Oh yeah, don't worry. You should watch some Moto matches with me sometime, if you want to. See someone take some punishment out on Lifebane Zombie, we can sit down and have ourselves an afternoon.
Quick keeps from both players. Foundry Street Denizen's going to get the party started. Let's see if Daniel has a Thoughtseize here. The answer is no.
He has brought in Duress, which I don't mind. I think Duress is okay in this matchup.
Feels very time sensitive.
Yes, although there may be only 7 total spells in Kevin's deck, assuming that he's boarded out Titan Strength, which I believe is the case.
What do we have here? A Burning Tree Emissary.
Uh-oh.
This is the kind of draw you do not want to be up against because you don't draw and start to catch up. There's a Fire Drinker Satyr. So this is triggers an attack here for 3.
And Kevin here with a spread of creatures. He's not susceptible to Bile Blight. And David without Drown in Sorrow in his deck. This is the type of draw on the play here that's very, very hard for Black Devotion to keep up with.
And we're going to see how much the attack was there for because you saw a little bit of, correcting and asking the judge and how much it's going to be for. If Kevin did everything correctly, it's an attack for 3. So a couple more copies of Fire Drinkers here. Now Bile Blight could actually be quite good. And Kevin is incentivized to play these before combat because of Foundry Street Denizen.
Yeah, although he does have an out here. He can just play Legion Loyalist and pump the Fire Drinker Satyr this turn. He doesn't have to play into Bile Blight.
Let's see if he sees that line of play. Oh boy, there's a Fire Drinker. I think he's moving in. That's a Legion Loyalist.
And I don't mind if he just doesn't play this Fire Drinker Satyr now, because what ends up happening is David will Bile Blight the Fire Drinker Satyr. You still get 3, 4, 5, 6 points of damage across, and you have a Fire Drinker Satyr as backup. I think playing the third one here is too big of a risk, but the second one is not necessarily bad. I would have just played Legion Loyalist and Pump, I think. But this line of play is not bad.
Yeah, the reason, it's easy to say now because we're looking at David Daniel's hand and seeing a Bile Blight, but Bile Blight's the only card you have to play around.
Yeah.
And that allows you to do that. Individual removal spells like Doomblade, those don't matter. So this is going to be an attack here for 3, 4, 5, 6. Daniel's going to go down to 11. Now there's the backup Fire Drinker Satyr, and Kevin Rand is all in right now.
Also, by the way, against Mono Red, Night Veil Spectre is a lot better than Lifebane Zombie.
Noted.
Just looking at this board.
Noted. David Daniel, no third land. Into the red zone we go. Let's see if we'll see any pumps here with Fire Drinker. It's going to be an attack for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7. Maybe not. And it will be. So there's going to be a Doomblade or an Ultimate Price. Either one works. And Fire Drinker Satyr will pay the price. So that's going to die. You see 1, 2, 3, 4 points of damage. Daniel's going to go down to 7. Let's make it 8, 9, 10. So that's going to be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He's going down to 4. Timely draw on the Rogue Belt, Maka. There's a Devour Flesh. Not you. Just got to pass with, with the Doomblade at the ready.
Yep, and all these Knuckleheads are good against a deck that's only casting 1 removal spell a turn.
Doomblade takes that down. Daniel goes down to 2. Daniel draws a card. It's a Pack Rat.
Although he is in a position now where if Kevin floods out, the game can still be close.
And this is an attack with everybody. That's a dropping of the hand, and that is going to do it. Kevin Rand is going to win this match over David Daniel. Mono Red Aggro is moving on to its 3rd finals in a row.